methodology committee. I think this is correct. The RENA numbers do not come from, they're not locally derived. They're derived from the state. HCD sends them to us. And the allocation process is one of whatever the numbers that come from the state for this region then get distributed through what we believe to be, at least in this 9-county Bay Area, a relatively equitable allocation process through this committee. So we would not be tossing new numbers on a community. It would be HCD that would be saying, these are the projected growth numbers. When HCD does that, they indeed will be looking at plans on the ground and certainly expected growth based on both the economics, density, et cetera, et cetera. So it would seem to me that the 40, and again, all land use is local. Let's make that really clear. We cannot, neither ABAG nor MTC can impose, we cannot impose local land use decisions on cities, right? And so I wanted to make that clear. I know that 4,400 number, I think I may be wrong, maybe a little higher, a little lower, may seem high, but as far as I'm reading this, it is not an imposition to develop those units, correct? It is an analytical number used within the analysis, the EIR analysis, to see what are the impacts and do we meet the preferred scenario goals.
That's correct. It's part of a vision, a blueprint for how the region can grow more sustainably. The growth allocation, how it relates to the transportation investments, how they collectively perform. That's correct.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, David Rabbit.
You're Dave.
We'll get to you, Dave.
No, thank you. I think some of the questions I had were answered. So it is within a PDA that was offered by the city of Brisbane in conjunction with the city of San Francisco. I think, quite frankly, the way the market analysis or the market approach that we took with that number 4,400 of an unapproved project that I assume is proposed at 4,400 is somewhat problematic or unfortunate that it's the same number, because I think it does imply that at least a regional body, it gives leverage to someone that is trying to get something approved. And that's a bit unfortunate because we always talk about the local control, which I totally agree with. And everything that was said by my colleagues, I think is very true in that going forward. But again, within the plan development area, which I assume had either a specific plan or is within the range of what would be required or densities of the general plan, correct? That 4,400 is somewhere within there. It's either going to, I don't know if it's at the high end, low or middle.
It's one of the alternatives being considered by the city through the current planning process, and it's at the high end.
Okay. And again, I think it's just that number being what was proposed but has not been approved and gone through the vetting process seemingly is the issue. And again, not having having that range that's required out there, there are very few general plans that are ever built out to the maximum densities that, at least I would imagine most of the jurisdictions throughout the Bay Area, at least, that maybe that methodology that took that into account might be more realistic going forward.
I mean, this area is a specific area. It's a large area. It's being contemplated for a range of development. I mean, let's be honest. It's a very controversial plan related to the city of Brisbane, and that's part of the reason why it's garnering a lot of attention. I think it's a fair point that it's probably unfortunate that the high end being contemplated by the city is also the developer's alternative, because it's raising alarm bells. That's not what the number is based on. It's, as was described by Board Member Romero, that when there isn't particularly for a priority development area, when there isn't an adopted plan threshold that's been put forward by the city, when there is a planning process in place, and we are working to come up with a sustainable approach to growth for the region, particularly in key locations that are relatively per capita low VMT locations, one of the things that is assessed is, what's being looked at, what's being contemplated. And with the backstop that the jurisdiction isn't required to implement that. But if a higher level of housing, along with a high level of jobs, were both advanced in this area from a regional perspective, that alignment with the transit investments, and there's more coming, they're in the plan, that could be good from a regional perspective. It doesn't require the local jurisdiction to do it. But the regional point of view on that type of development is that's in large part what the plan is about.
Great.